pleasure to be here today. As Ann said, Sherrie Merrow with Natural Gas Vehicles for America. I'm based in Denver. We're a trade association that's out of DC, and we represent natural gas vehicles across the U.S. 200 plus members. It's a little more meaningful to take a look at some of the logos that we have, and we have several members in the room here joining us today. So the other thing I like to point out is there are major players in our economy, in our country, that are using natural gas every day. And you can see from all of these logos that we've got a lot of coverage. What I'm going to talk about today is, it's an overview of natural gas vehicles, but focusing on some of the newer things that have come about. And why do we care to begin with? What's the driving factor? So the problems that we see are the emissions issues, whether they're basic air quality issues or whether they're CO2 issues, being able to do something to reduce emissions, and then the volatility of oil prices. How do we mitigate a fuel that can be domestic, that we can drive forward with, that will actually be cheaper for us to use? So I think we all know that emissions are a problem, especially air quality. 134 million people live in areas with air that is not healthy to breathe. If we take a look at the leading sources for your air quality, it's the vehicle emissions. And we only have 70 or 26% of the vehicles meet current air quality standards. So we have a task there to get done. If we take a look at the economics, and this is a projection from the Energy Information Administration, we are seeing that they show diesel will be at $8 a gallon by 2040. One never knows where this will play out, but it's pretty safe to say that prices will rise. Gasoline will be close to $7 a gallon. And natural gas may be as high as $4 a gallon. But again, the supply being what it is, I struggle to think that it will be that high. If we look forward into the presentation, we'll discuss some of the economics a little later. So as we move forward, there's four things we're going to address. We've addressed the emissions aspect, there's the economics aspect, the fact that they're available now, and the fact that it's domestic. So the reduction benefits that we're seeing right now are very significant and have improved in the last 3 years or so tremendously. So this is some of the information we'll be going into. We have 3 newer engines, and they're not brand new now, they're in production and working, that have come out, and these are in the class 5, 6, and through 8. So these are medium and heavy duty trucks. A 6.7 liter engine is your buses and that type of thing, maybe package trucks. Your 9 liter can be a little bit heavier duty truck, and then you have a 12 liter, which is your on the road, going places, hauling loads type of truck. Note the CNG, LNG, or RNG. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. You're familiar with all 3, I'm sure. But I'll just point out that renewable natural gas either becomes compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas. But it has some dynamics that are really changing the market as well. So one of the things that's not really well known, but has come about with these new engines, is that the current standard is that 0.2 line at the top. That's 0.2 grams of NOx. This is what we're talking about. NOx is what contributes to poor air quality. And that is where the EPA has set the standard. That's the standard that diesel trucks are tested on in highway conditions. The 0.02 dotted line is where the natural gas trucks come out. So they are much cleaner at this point. These engines have been out for several years, so the engines that, if you're buying a new bus, you're likely to get this engine in it, or a new vehicle, heavy-duty truck. If we take that one step farther, the University of California at Riverside did a study, And this first study was on the 9-liter engine, and maybe about 2 years ago. And it found that comparing diesel, the current diesel, latest and greatest diesel at that time, to the latest near zero engine, it found out that the diesel was operating at idling and low speeds at 5 times the NOx emissions than the EPA allows. So instead of 0.2 grams, it was 1 gram. So it was significantly more polluting. It was tested in highway conditions, and at highway conditions, it's at 0.2. So if you're going 50, 60 miles an hour down the road, it works. But if you're not, then you're scrubbing and DPF and all of the things you put on a diesel don't work. And they even clog up faster, and it's problematic. So what they found with the natural gas engine, that instead of the 0.02, it operated at 0.01 at idling and low speeds. So you get truly, you're starting to split hairs, and you're talking about zero emissions at this point. The good news on this study is they did another study just recently. The results just came out on the 12-liter and got the same results. So the diesels are still polluting at the rates that are 5 times higher at idling. Again, this is in use idling and low speeds. And the natural gas trucks are at 0.00, 2, 1, or even less. We also have greenhouse gas reductions. This has been around, this continues to improve, but liquefied natural gas at 11% for CO2 and CNG at 17% reduction. So one of the new things that's out is the renewable natural gas. And we've been hearing about this for a couple of years, more than that probably, but it's come really into play lately. And if you take a look at the carbon intensity rate, which are numbers on the right, diesel's at 102, natural gas conventional 88, hydrogen 55, and electricity in California, which means a non-coal based electricity generation, is at about 39. The green lines represent renewable natural gas. So landfill gas, and again, part of it's what's the landfill made up of, can be anywhere from 34 to 65. The renewable wastewater is 8 to 35. Food green waste, we start seeing negative numbers. So if you start using renewable natural gas that comes from food or green waste, or look at the dairy, you're either at minus 25 or minus 300. And what you're doing is you're taking methane out of the air, so it's not getting into the air to begin with. So you start going negative on your carbon. This is a fantastic story. This is not about just tailpipe emissions. This is, the full life cycle of your fuel. So I think that as we move more and more, and renewable natural gas is generated from these sources, and then it's either cleaned up and used right there, as in the case in Indiana, the dairy farm, where they run their milk trucks on natural gas that has been processed from the animal waste, taken, processed, and then in a pipeline over across the street to the station where their milk trucks fuel and haul it off all over the state. But this is really, I think, the future of where we're going, mixing this in a pipeline, so you're already improving, adding the quantities we have of the regular conventional gas to renewable will start to reduce those carbon emissions even more. So we offer the cleanest commercially available path through that method. So sustainable for your fleet. And this slide is actually in a flyer out at the desk where you checked in, so if you'd like to pick this up. We did a lot of work for the Volkswagen funding in writing plans and comments on plans and that type of thing. And in the context of doing that, we did a study on using Argonne Labs tool, a fleet tool, to measure emissions. And we wanted to find out what would be the most cost-effective way to reduce a ton of NOx, or a pound of NOx, I'm sorry. So if we look at the top line where you've got the Class 8 truck tractor, Natural gas is at $27 a pound. Electric at 51, diesel at 58. Now, part of this is because diesel's not performing to the EPA standard, so it takes a lot more running of the truck a lot more trucks to get to that amount. On the electric side, the trucks are just so expensive, it takes more to get to that reduction. And the natural gas is kind of the mix of a reasonable cost and a lot of reduction in NOx. And it's across the board, whether it's a bus, whether it's a transit bus, whether it's a trash truck, or the natural gas truck. Can't recommend this tool enough. It's a brand new tool from Argonne Labs. It's based on the A-Fleet tool. It's called Heavy Duty Vehicle Emissions Calculator, easy to use. It takes into effect in use. So whether you're idling, whether you're on the highway, whatever, and it puts the right factors in for those purposes. It fixes some assumptions that we had on natural gas. It adds in the new natural gas trucks. It fixes assumptions on diesel, on electric, and several other fuels. So most up to date. If you're using the EPA DEQ, you're using an extremely updated tool. And this tool here is the Argonne Labs approved newest tool. One thing I will say is in the VW planning and in the projects, so this was made aware to all of the states. New Mexico has put it in its VW plan that it's anyone applying for a project and funding in New Mexico will prove their emissions using this tool. And we all know, I think, payback can depend on a variety of factors, and it's how many miles you travel and what your fuel costs are and any aid grants and so forth. But there is a payback that happens that makes it worthwhile in as little as 18 to 24 months, and some it's less than 12. So Louisiana, I think you're aware here of the tax credits. There's 30%, used to be 50. Be nice if we could get back up to the 50% of the incremental cost, but we'll work with the 30, and I'll tell you, based on the work I do across the country with all of the states, that this isn't bad, that there are many states that have nothing, and a few states do better than this, but this is something that gives you a bit to work with. Your discount on the excise tax, 4 cents, is helpful, and the trust settlement, while focused largely on school buses and then government vehicles, that's still helpful. That's still something that can be usable. The NGV America VW Trust Center, I just bring this up. The website in general is open to the public, and there's a lot of information here, a lot of presentations. The UC Riverside study is there. But we also have a state-by-state look at the trust. The plan that Louisiana had is out there, and every state's plan is out there. The programs, the grant programs that are in play or have been in play are out there. So it's an information website that's available to you. One of the things we've worked on, and Louisiana was one of the first states to adopt this, under the FAST Act several years back, the federal government said that a natural gas vehicle, this is the Class 8 trucks, the heavy-duty trucks, can run at 2,000 pounds more than other trucks. So federal highway regulations said you could only run these trucks at 80,000 pounds. So if a natural gas truck, which can weigh up to 2,000 pounds more because the fuel's heavier and the tanks are heavier, you were taking and giving the fleet running natural gas a disadvantage against diesel, because they couldn't carry as much load based on that weight that they had to meet. So the federal government said, we're not going to do that. We're going to give a 2,000 pound increased allotment to natural gas trucks. So 2 states already they didn't really care what you did. You just pay for it. It's a small fee in Washington and Wyoming. But we've had up to 29 states now have approved this, because it's not real helpful to have interstates with this, but then not the state highways. You can get off and get some gas or whatever. And so we need to get that done. Hopefully now the Federal Highway Administration has come out and said this will be a mandate. This is no longer something that's nice where you can prove. It's not a mandate for state highways, they can't do that, but it is a mandate for the interstates. What else are we doing at the federal level? So we're asking for the 5-year extension of the alternative fuel tax credit, which was mentioned earlier. This is your 50 cents off on taxes, federal taxes at the pump. And that has been huge in the past. However, it's been typically 1 year back, 1 year forward. You can't plan. It's impossible. So we're asking for a 5-year planning cycle of getting that 50 cents per gallon of fuel off. We're asking for the incremental cost on a truck. So a truck that's heavy duty pays an extra 12% in tax. We're asking that on a natural gas truck, that incremental cost not be put into the mix. Why would we pay more and be penalized for buying a natural gas truck that's cleaner than a diesel truck? So we're saying we'll pay the diesel rate, but not the incremental portion. We're also looking at marine and getting the diesel gallon equivalent. So some years back, we worked to get a gasoline gallon equivalent pricing and diesel gallon equivalent measurement on stations. So you can put that up. Because if I'm someone rolling up to a station and I see, therms or something that are measuring my fuel, that means nothing. So we needed to have an equalization, and we were able to get that across the board. But now we need it for the marine industry and inland waterways, same thing. The other thing is appropriations funding. We've asked for $15 million for NGV research and development. That actually has happened. Merrow is working on engine improvements and tank improvements as we speak. So we're going to see some of that come about. $50 million for grants for clean cities. That was something that is out there and has happened in the past and happening again. I mentioned the 2,000 pounds. And a study was asked for on barriers to getting NGVs out there. We have currently a NGV parity bill put out by Senator Mullen. And we've got the tax extension in there, the infrastructure tax credit. So there was a $30,000 infrastructure tax credit. That doesn't help us a whole lot. So we've asked for more money on that. And the other things I've mentioned. We also have a light duty parity bill, and this was put out in order to say, if you're going to give an EV $7,500, let's give a natural gas vehicle $7,500, and in the light duty arena. So our light duty pickups and that type of thing. It's basically a parity issue, not, why are we giving it to one entity, why not give it to all? The other thing that is a key factor when you look at NGVs is we're road tested and commercially available today. There's 23 million on the road across the world, probably 65,000 on US roads. But we have vehicles in all of these categories and more. And we're seeing huge growth in the marine and locomotives. Most of your major locomotive companies or railroad companies have projects that are ongoing. We have one that I love. The East Coast Railway in Florida is making liquefied natural gas to use for power generation in Jacksonville, Florida. They're putting it on a train and calling it to Miami to be used. The train's running on liquefied natural gas, and then it picks up another type of load, brings that back to Jacksonville and does it over again. So we're seeing that's a little short rail type of operation, but I'm aware of UP and BNSF and all of these others that are looking at this. And then in the marine environment, we're dealing with, not the next slide. When it comes up, we'll talk about the reason that it's driving the marine environment. There's a lot of change going on there. So the engines I mentioned that are out, we've talked about where they're at, where they're being tested. Same kinds of torque, actually they're better engines than we've seen in the past. Much to the earlier point, problematic in 2010, 2011, but not really now. The 12 leaders come out and they seem to have really fixed a lot of problems and things are moving forward. So you're getting the right kind of emissions reductions. The pricing still is reasonable. It will come down as we have more of these engines roll out. And so we've got exciting new things, frankly, that take us down to that zero emission. And it's available from all of these people. You know, take a look. It's Freightliner, Peterbilt, Kenworth, Mack. It's you walk in and say, I want a CNG truck, I want an LNG truck, I want a diesel truck, but it's one of the options now. It's not, you're going to have to order it, it's a special make or anything like that. And these are all recognizable entities, all using natural gas engines in these newer engines. So I mentioned the international regulation that's coming about. And the 2020 compliance that IMO's come out with is that the very dirty diesel fuel that's being used in ships today has a 3.5 sulfur by mass, and it has to go down to 0.5. And there are 3 ways to comply. You can try to clean it up to get to that point. That's not really very efficient or effective, and it's certainly not cost effective. You can switch to something called marine gas oil. There's not enough of it, and they're really not gearing up for it. It's not prepared for the demand, basically. Or you can switch to liquefied natural gas. So we're seeing Carnival Cruise Lines. You may have heard of this instance. Every new ship they're getting, and Norwegian's starting to do it as well, is natural gas. And part of the reason for that, fuel ends up being cheaper. They will recover their costs within a few years, and it's cleaner, so it meets all of the standards. But one of the main reasons the cruise ships like it is quiet. So instead of the engines making as much noise on the cruise ship as they have in the past, you have quieter engines that are not doing that. A lot of freighters are picking it up, and I think we're just going to see huge demand. We already have bunkering where the ships can kind of come up to another ship and fuel. That's already going on, and Florida's really taking this on big time. The Gulf will be doing it as well. So we save money and support Louisiana workers, low cost, domestically abundant. We've all heard about the 90, 100, and 110-year supply of natural gas. Frankly, we have no idea how vast our supply is. It's just huge. Louisiana, top 5 natural gas producer, and 90% of the gas produced is used here. So it's definitely a direct economic benefit to use that. One of the reasons the natural gas price is low is, if you take a look at the green, 23%, that's the commodity price, the price of the natural gas itself. Take a look at the 60%, and that's the price of oil, and that's the component in the price of oil. So diesel and gasoline. So when you see oil going up, there's a very direct relation to the price at the pump going up for you, but not with natural gas. The price at the pump doesn't need to go up based on oil whatsoever. And natural gas has been, we saw that line in one of my first slides. It's been very steady all along the way. Another forecast from the Energy Information Administration, 2017 diesel gallon equivalent is what we're looking at, and they're projecting that gasoline at $4.25 in 2050, diesel fuel at $4.11, natural gas at $1.81, and electricity at $11.18. And part of that is the projection that we will be generating power with renewable fuel by then, and very little of the cost-effective natural gas. So that really will raise the price on your electric vehicle. A lot of stations, a lot of station builders. We're seeing those go up. We have 2,000 or so today. We have 28 stations either in operation, plan, or and both CNG and LNG in Louisiana today. And so basically, I just would present to you today that natural gas vehicles, they've been around, they've worked, they have improved. We've got significant improvements going forward. And it starts to really beg the question of looking at a bigger picture than a tailpipe emission, looking at what's possible economically to even go to RNG and start creating, product from our municipalities and things like that. Longmont, Colorado is using their wastewater to produce natural gas to run their trash trucks. We're starting to see that happen across the board. But fossil fuel gas is cleaner than it's ever been. We're capturing more methane than we've ever done. In the 30 years of production of fuel through our fields, we're seeing, I think it's carbon levels and methane emission levels that are around what they were in the 70s when we're producing 100 times more fuel. So things change. I think that would be my point. One industry doesn't stay the same, and that's true for all of our technologies. We're all going to improve. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The solar engine issue that they were talking about, the 2010, 2011, can you give us some more background on what that issue actually was? Maybe it's not, was it the size and the power, or was it issues with the actual engines themselves?
Well, I'm not sure exactly which engines we're talking about, but if we just take a look in general, and I'm probably not the best person, Kent might be the best person to answer this question, but in general, the improvements have just been types of capture of the fuel more efficient in the engine and in this burning of it. And
was it more the introduction of the 12, maybe, that really helped move things forward?
You mean the 12?
Maybe like a long sizing, was it?
Part of it was a duty cycle. Duty cycle running, we were trying to do a 9 liter to do more than probably should have.
Okay.
But then there was some major work on the top end of the engine, the valve train area, and some things that were done in the intake system that that's what's made the difference. I think you've seen that with your buses. Once the new heads and all were put on them, those issues have gone away. And the introduction of the 12 liter, Renee, probably with y'all in the waste field, y'all saw a big change once y'all got the bigger engine doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions?